Let's have a listen now to a talk by Kenyon Gibson, an interview I did with him a few years ago, about the incredible number of people who've stood in the way of the Bush family and ended up dead in plane crashes.
My name is Kenyon Gibson. I come from America and used to work in the U.S. Navy. I did intelligence operations in and around Guantanamo Bay. After I left the Navy, I've done some what they call PSYOPs, psychological warfare, in busting drug dealers in 1993 to 1994. Recently, I've written a book that a few government agencies in America might not be too happy about, and that's called Common Sense, a study of the Bushes, the CIA, and the suspicions regarding 9/11. Presently, it's only available in Arabic.
Can you take us through some of the suspicious deaths, particularly plane crash deaths that have been associated with Bush Sr. and George W.? People who maybe are a threat to the Bush family have met their ends through plane crashes.
Well, that is one suspicious angle, Tony. We could start with a guy named Bin Laden, in this case, Salem Bin Laden. He flew his plane into power lines after taking off from Earl May Field in 1979 in Texas. The owner of the airstrip said he was a very experienced pilot. We just couldn't understand why he decided to go right instead of left.
What way was he connected with the Bush family?
Oh, they were friends. They were buddies. They were business buddies. Bin Laden used to come to Texas quite a lot. A lot of people don't realize that, but the Bushes and the Bin Ladens were just, they were very, very close, the whole family. There's corroboration of that. If you read Kathy O'Brien's book, Transformation of America, there's quite a lot of interaction between the Saudi royals, rich Saudi business people, and the Bush family.
What about the guy that flew into the power lines? Was he some kind of threat to the Bush family?
Well, we don't actually know why. He did invest quite a lot of money. He was there. He was just one person there. He's one less person to tell the story, put it that way. He's one of many, though. I think he's the only Saudi Arabian to suffer such a fate. Most who suffered were Bush's fellow Americans, and including a number of politicians like Nick Begich, who was a Democrat. Nick was flying with Hale Boggs, who was a congressman who was working on the Warren Commission and had stated that the FBI was lying about Kennedy's death. His plane disappeared in Alaska on the 16th of October in 1972, and the CIA just claimed that the plane could never be found. Maybe it wasn't meant to be found. How can you not find a plane these days with all the technology you have? But that's what the CIA claimed. Then there was Ron Brown, Commerce Secretary in 1996. His plane crashed on the 3rd of April that year. Now, he had a lot of connections to Enron. That's an issue nobody really wants to talk about much, is it? So we don't know what he knew. He died with his knowledge. Another person to die with his knowledge was Gary Caradori, who was a state investigator from Nebraska who was connecting the dots between the Bushes, Larry King, and child abuse at high levels in government. His plane crashed on 11th of July 1990 along with his 8-year-old son, and he had been developing a lead to the top politicians in America at the time. So he disappeared, his notes disappeared, and I guess we're not supposed to ask any questions on that. That bit of information can be found, by the way, in a book written by a Republican politician, John DeCamp, and it was just so sordid, the whole investigation, that there are a number of Republicans in America who aren't working on all these evil Iran-Contra schemes. And, I think it goes to show that, hey, this wasn't some left-wing politician out to get the Bushes. This was one of his own people who was connecting the dots, and Senator John DeCamp was finding that a lot of people were coming to him and saying, hey, the Bushes are involved in pedophile scandals, and he was able to document that very well. But anyway, you're asking about deaths in plane crashes. Let's stick to that, and let's get to Mel Carnahan, who perished in a plane crash while running against John Ashcroft for a Senate seat in Missouri. That was on the 16th of October, 2000. Now, ironically, the state put his widow on the ballot, and she beat Ashcroft. Then another Democrat to perish was George W. Collins, who perished on the 8th of December 1972 in a plane crash at Chicago's Midway Airport. Somebody from another country was Amaro Da Costa, Portugal's defense minister. He had been planning to disclose documents related to the Iranian arms deals in 1980. He never got to do so as his plane went down on the 4th of December 1980. He is one of many, and there'll be other names on the list, who were investigating Iran-Contra. Jake Horten was an American. He got into his jet on the 10th of April, 1989. He was actually going to discuss illegal campaign contributions made by an Enron official in Florida. His trip lasted 10 minutes. John Heinz, just a moment ago I was talking about the investigation into Iran-Contra. John Heinz was one of those people investigating that. His plane experienced trouble. When it did, they called for a helicopter to come and look at the plane because they thought the landing gear was defective. The helicopter ended up crashing into the plane on the 4th of April, 1991. Incidentally, John Heinz was then married to Teresa Heinz, who is now married to John Forbes Carey. Dorothy Hunt died in a United Airlines plane crash in 1972. Along with her were a number of others who might have embarrassed the Nixons and Bushes. She herself was a CIA operative and the wife of Howard Hunt, a suspect in the Kennedy assassination. John F. Kennedy Jr.'s plane was to crash on the 16th of July, 1996, with many of his family members on board. It had been released unofficially that he was going to enter politics. So, one more dead Kennedy. Micky Leland, on the 7th of August 1989, died in a plane crash in Ethiopia. Now, Leland was one of the best politicians America had. He was a caring man. He was from Texas, but he was a Democrat, and he really tried to make a change in America and around the world, and he certainly criticized the Bushes on occasion, so his death at least indirectly benefited them. Gerry Litton, a representative in Missouri, was on the way to celebrate winning the Democratic nomination, but he never got there. His plane went down on the 3rd of August, 1976. Now, we come to something that's very familiar for anyone from the UK, and that's Lockerbie. There are many people who think that the U.S. Detonated the bombs on that plane. That was Pan Am Flight 103 over Lockerbie on the 4th of December, 1998. Charles McKee was on board, and he was part of an investigating team that had been connected some dots between the CIA and a rogue unit called Corea, which had links to terrorists. His mother was to tell Time magazine, "I've had a feeling that if Chuck hadn't been on the plane, it wouldn't have been bombed." Along with them were several other investigators. Now, it's convenient to blame Libya. Libya has paid some money in relation to this. Libya has also made a statement saying, yes, we paid money, but that's not to say that we did this. Now, related to 9/11, we come to a pilot named Sten Molin. He was the pilot of American Airlines Flight 587. That plane crashed on the 12th of November, 2001, over Long Island. It destroyed the homes of a number of New York City firemen when it did. And he had been in the air-controlled tower on 9/11, and he had expressed doubts about the official story. So we don't get to hear what he had to say. I believe what he had to say was that there was a lack of transponder codes going back from the so-called hijacked planes, and that opens up a whole line of inquiry as to what really went on. Were those planes remotely controlled? Stephen Mostow met his death in the air when he was flying in Colorado on the 24th of March 2002. He was a microbiologist. That may well have to do with the 9/11 investigation or the related anthrax investigation, the anthrax shenanigans that happened right after 9/11. And for some reason, there's been a plethora of deaths of microbiologists, especially those who had to do with human DNA and targeted bacteria, that is genetically targeted bacteria. But that's getting a little off this. Let's stay on the track of people who died while in the air. We have a Republican next, Larkin Smith. He's from Mississippi. He died on the 5th of August, 1989. His plane crashed in that state. He was investigating the deaths of 5 Green Beret colonels who had been involved in CIA drug running in South America. John Tower was another Republican. He was from Texas. He was investigating the Iran-Contra affair and headed up the Tower Commission. He died on April 5th, 1991. Now, we go to Panama, and we look at General Omar Torrijos. This man was a friend of Graham Greene, the man about whom Graham Greene wrote a book called Getting to Know the General. He was very popular in Panama and in many circles. He had a real vision and an understanding of Panama, and he did a lot to improve things, and he did a lot to stop unwanted CIA influence, including drug running. He died on the 31st of July, 1981. After that, the U.S. was able to move in Manuel Noriega. So we see how the U.S. came out of that. Paul Wellstone, he was a very popular Democrat senator from Minnesota. He died in a plane crash on 25th October 2002. That was 11 days before the American elections. That was a very key death because he died, and along with him his wife, daughter, and several aides. So the Democrats were not able to put his wife on the ballot as they were when Mel Carnahan perished on a plane crash in another state. The Republican challenger was able to win, and when he did, it broke the tie in the Senate or the House. I'm not sure if he was a congressman or a senator. Sorry about that. That was just extremely decisive and very timely. It is kind of suspicious that the woman investigating the crash, Carol Carmody, had formerly worked for the CIA and had worked on the investigation of Senator Carnahan's crash.
The incredible list of people there dying in plane crashes. One would think that anyone who's a political campaigner would never want to get into an aircraft.
There are political campaigners who have made that decision. That's a very wise decision. We note the decision of Chavez from Venezuela, who, when he was in the United States, refused to fly on a certain plane, stating that he felt CIA sabotage had been involved, and he certainly had reason to know. He basically caught the CIA in a coup in Venezuela, and the American embassy doesn't even deny it. The American embassy was ridiculing him in very racist overtones. Ironically, when they were ridiculing him, using a monkey as a metaphor for him, Colin Powell was in attendance at the American embassy. It was just one embarrassing scene after the Americans had been caught in a CIA coup trying to displace Chavez because Chavez was not going to play ball and give them the oil percentages that they wanted.
Kenyon Gibson, their former naval intelligence officer, about the Bush family plane crash. It's time to sign off now. Murdoch News at 7, time followed by Mohammed and his Arabian Nights. A sister show, Dialect, is on Mondays at 11, thanks to our guest in the first hour, Labour councillors from Southmead, Jenny Smith. I'm online at thisweek.org.uk. You'll find links to these various stories, and you can follow me on Twitter at Tony Gosling. I'm wishing you now a relaxing and enjoyable weekend, and don't let the banksters get you down.